So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's marine biology session. It's really lovely to have you joining us today. It's a very sunny, uncharacteristically warm January day in Plymouth. I'm actually here in my office, just at the MBA, overlooking very calm seas and very sunny skies. So it's great that you're able to join us. Just before I start, just to tell you a few of our housekeeping elements for today's session. So as is the case of Zoom, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with it. We have our chat function at the bottom, so there'll be various sort of opportunities to kind of share information there, and also the Q&A function. So if you want to use the Q&A function to ask any questions, so if you click on that button, probably at the bottom of your screen, you can then put your questions in there and we'll be able to ask Celine and Russell at the end of the presentation. So on that note, I think it's worth welcoming Russell and Celine. I should probably warn you beforehand that Russell has had 2 days of having to be very serious. So I think he's got a little bit of pent up frivolity in him, which isn't a bad thing. So Celine and Russell, would you like to switch your cameras on for me? Here we go. Hello and welcome, and feel free to switch your microphones on as well, I should have said. It's lovely to have you joining us, and we're here to talk, amongst other things, about your amazing new book that's just been published, Ocean Endangered, which you can see now on the slides here. And it was a real pleasure. I actually got a chance to see it before it went to publication, because I did the forward for the book as well. And it is a wonderful book, lots of great content. But before we go into that, Russell, Celine, it'd be great to hear from you a little bit about your careers. So let's start with Celine, and then we'll go to Russell next. So Celine, first of all, hello and welcome to the MBA virtually.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So first of all, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and any sort of particular sort of career pathways that you followed into where you are now?
So at the moment, I am in my first year of a master's degree in environmental management at the University of Montpellier in the south of France. Before that, so I grew up in the UK, I did the International Baccalaureate there, and then I took a year out, and by this point I'd already been volunteering with the World Cetacean Alliance and its partner Incredible Oceans. So that's how I got to know Russell, and I got involved in a lot of marine conservation outreach work, so a lot of communicating to the public all the different findings and how they could help. And after a year where I spent some time in Southern Africa working with whale and dolphin research, I did my bachelor's degree in the Netherlands. And then I took another year out because of COVID, partly because I also couldn't find a job. The joy of being a biologist. And during this time, I found a voluntary research position in the south of France, where I worked on the interaction of pathogens and plastics in seagulls. And so it was from there that I ended up in France, and that's where I am now, where I started my master's degree.
Amazing. So quite a varied career already, and lots of really stunning and varied places. We had a couple of photos that you sent through as well. So we've got one of you with some fishing line. So could you just tell us what that's about?
Yes. So that photo shows me in front of a huge pile of fishing gear that we collected. And it was part of one of the internships I took part in, which was based around ghost fishing gear. So fishing gear that's lost or abandoned or has been washed overboard. And it continues to catch fish and other species, hence the name ghost fishing gear, and how it's a big problem and we need to start collecting it, but also give it a value by being able to recycle it. There are a lot of products now where and companies that recycle it into clothing, shoes, skateboards, but unfortunately it's still a niche market and everything's quite expensive, so we're hoping it's going to become more mainstream in the future.
Great. And was it at this point that you became particularly sort of passionate about conservation, or has this been a sort of a growing through thing that sort of has been a constant aspect of your youth and growing into adulthood?
Yes, good question. Well, conservation, it's always been kind of at the forefront of my mind ever since I remember. I was picking up plastic bags off the beach even when I was like 3 years old. But my fascination with the ocean has become more intense over the last several years. partly because of my work with Incredible Oceans and the opportunities I've had to spend time around different places in the globe and different coastlines that are stunning.
Great stuff. So could you tell me a little bit more about Incredible Oceans, exactly what it is? Russell, I'm sure you'll be able to add to this in a moment as well.
Yes. Well, Incredible Oceans, its aim is to increase ocean literacy. I'm sure Russell will give the details, but the idea is that the general public knows very little about the ocean, and even in the UK, which is an island, a big island, but an island, many people, including school children, don't know a lot about the ocean. They can name the different oceans. They can say maybe, oh, that's a wave, that's a beach, that's, you know, different coastal features, but they can't tell us a lot about the life in the ocean or how dependent we as humans are on it and how much impact we have. So we wanted to really raise awareness about that. But Russell, maybe you want to add to that.
Great stuff. Yeah, I'm going to move on to Russell now and just get a bit more information from Russell. But thank you, Celine. That was great to hear some of your backstory. So Russell, welcome back to the MBA, I should say. You joined us for the Young Marine Biologists Summit last year. It's great to have you along with that. Just in case anybody's watching, we'd like to know more about the Young Marine Biologists Summit for 22. The theme is Hidden Ocean, but last year it was a theme of predators. So you joined us for that. So can you tell us a bit about yourself, Russell, and your really interesting career? Because we spoke a little bit about this in the YMB Summit, and I think it's great for people to hear some of the different pathways people have followed, that not all marine biologists just go straight into marine biology and have sort of born and breathed the whole sort of marine biology pathway.
Yes, so I didn't know what I wanted to do, like a lot of teenagers. So I thought, well, if I take a broad range of subjects, so I did art, geography, and maths, and I started doing a fine art painting degree. I realised it wasn't for me, and I saw a sign on the London Underground that said we've only explored 2% of our oceans, and I thought, whoa, like that's crazy that is a fact. I was like, right, this sounds like an awesome job. I'm gonna be an ocean explorer. So I contacted the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton and was like, hi, can an art school dropout come and study with you? And they went, yeah, that's fine. And I was like, what? I was not expecting that. Okay. So I went on and did my degree there and a master's, worked as a commercial oceanographer for a number of years, and then retrained as a secondary school science teacher. I did that for about 8 years, then left and at this time I was getting more interested in doing education outside of the classroom. So I'd already started doing like science shows and things. So I met Celine at an event called Whale Fest that we used to run, which became one of the largest marine festivals on earth, happened down in Brighton. We attracted about 15,000 people to that. And I was running like this hands-on experiments area with like oil spill cleanups and microscopes and things like that. And yeah, it was really cool. And so I decided to quit teaching in the classroom and went and set up Incredible Oceans on the back of Whale Fest, where we tried to talk to people about the ocean that don't know that they want to talk about the ocean. So the whole thing with Whale Fest, obviously everyone who came to it loved the sea and loved whales and things, and everyone here in the audience has probably signed up to this because they already love the ocean. But the real impact can be made when you engage people that don't know anything about the ocean, as Celine was alluding to there. So so set that up, and so alongside doing Incredible Oceans, I've also been doing a PhD at the University of Bath in phytoplankton. So I've taken my background in marine physics and been applying it to a biological kind of sphere and looking at how physics of the ocean affects affects phytoplankton. And yeah, and I managed to get my PhD despite the COVID, the lockdowns, and if anything, that helped actually, being locked in a room and being told you have to write stopped you from getting too distracted. But yes, there we go.
No escape from the PhD. Well, that's great, and I think it's really fantastic that you had that sort of inspiration to get into ocean conservation through a poster that you saw in the Underground as well. You know, that there are people who are city based, who are coastal based, and people can be inspired by the ocean wherever they live, and it can take a visit to a sea life centre to a poster like you're seeing to follow this career. So it's here for everybody to get involved in, which I think is a really good message. So in terms of the book then, so how did you both come from your sort of more research-based backgrounds? Obviously, Russell, you've got a creative leaning to you with your sort of art background, which I think is a great combination for scientists to have this sort of unique perspective. But how did you come about the book? What brought that about?
Well, if I'm honest, Flame Tree emailed us, and Flame Tree, an independent publisher based in London, and they said, we've stumbled across the Incredible Oceans website, and we really like your ethos, which is, trying to be positive and empowering, and raise the idea of ocean literacy. So would you be interested in writing this book? And I guess I was a bit daunted by the idea of writing a book by myself while also writing my PhD thesis. It's a lot of writing time. And Celine had recently sent me her dissertation to kind of proofread. And I just thought it was really well written. It was really interesting. And I wasn't expecting a dissertation to be interesting. So I said to Celine, I was like, don't suppose you fancy kind of co-authoring this book that I've been asked to write? And she said yes, which was good.
So you were both working on your PhDs and writing a book at the same time. That's quite an achievement. So in terms of the actual process of writing the book then, how did you find that, just so people have a bit of an insight into the process? Because I think it's something that a lot of people think, oh yeah, I'd like to write a book one day, but actually the realities of it can be quite challenging. There's a lot of things that you don't know about when you go into the process of working with publishers, working with illustrators, image collectors, what's the phrase, you know what I mean, and people who collect all the images for the book as well. So how's that been? Celine, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's an interesting experience. We both had busy schedules, as you can imagine. So the first challenge was to find some common time during which to write the book. I already had a deadline that I was going to move to France. Russell was, as he said, writing his PhD. So at some point we looked at our calendars and we said, right, we've got these 4 days in common. Let's write a book in 4 days. It was obviously during COVID, not a lockdown, but we thought, okay, it's best if we're in the same area. So we locked ourselves in my grandparents' flat in Eastbourne, and we thought, okay, we're going to sit down and write this many pages or this many chapters, each day. And that's pretty much what we did. So it was quite intense, but it definitely helped to be working in person with Russell, because we've been doing so many things via Zoom over the last 2 years that it's not the same. And we could bounce a lot of ideas off each other. We had our post-it walls with all kinds of different points. But I think it's really nice to have a co-author. I don't know how I would write a book on my own. I think that would be really quite a challenge.
It takes a lot of discipline, I think, to write a book, doesn't it? Because you don't have any, although you have a bigger deadline, there's all of these different little elements of the book that you need to contribute, and yeah, you have to be very disciplined. So all congratulations to you for having completed that, especially with the pressures of COVID and other things going on with PhDs and moving to France. And well, whilst you were writing the book, I think sometimes a lot of authors find that they tend to digress a little bit into other areas as they're learning about different topics. So was there any sort of particular areas of research that you hadn't heard about before you started writing the book that particularly sort of took your interest?
Well, so shall I take this one?
Yeah, feel free.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Well, I guess originally when they contacted us, it was going to be quite, I'd say, kind of traditional in its remit, and they wanted one chapter on each of the separate oceans. And then I was like, Ocean literacy principle 101 is there's not separate oceans, there's one big ocean. And that's one of the things that we talked about in the book, is we only have the singular ocean used throughout. So we broke the chapters up instead into like biomes. So we've got like the coast, the open ocean, the deep sea, poles, and coral reefs. So, and then within that, instead of it just being like a doom and gloom book where it's like all these bad things are happening, every chapter is like, look at all this cool stuff, but this bad thing's happening, but this is what you can do about it. So that's the kind of general format that we tried to come across. But yeah, it was really great. We used this little Pomodoro technique where we would do like 25 minutes of intense writing and then share to each other what we'd written, and then do another 25 minutes. And yeah, so it was quite intense, but it was good fun. It was quite productive, and it was great being in Eastbourne. So yeah, like next to the sea. So yeah, that was really good.
Daily inspiration. Sounds like you had a nice way of setting it up there, doing it that way. So in terms of the content, like you said, you had these really lovely sort of introductions to how the sea is so amazing and why things are incredible on our coastline and in these different biomes. And then some of the stark realities, which we all know about. But, you know, I find as well in sort of science, we often talk about some of the problems, but actually we do need to make sure we share some of the amazing progression we have in science and the ways that we're working towards conservation, working towards changing policy with research. So could you give me an example, maybe one each, of one of the stories that really took your sort of was most interesting for you in terms of a good news story of conservation?
Not exactly new as such, but well, just the proof, that a reoccurring proof that in order to have successful conservation, you need all the people living in the area and all the people who are affected to be involved. And it's been proved again and again, but I think we put that forward in one of our chapters at the end. We said, it's really important that you can't just create a marine protected area and say, all the people who used to fish there, no, you can't come in anymore. You're just outside, because that's never going to work, because that's their livelihood. It's really important for them that they are involved in the creation of any protected areas or any change in environmental policy. And there were positive examples where just a small change in fishing patterns, for example, if we avoid fishing in a certain area, this certain species, for just a couple of months per year, it could double or triple the amount of individuals that could be fished later on, or that were present in the population. And that I thought was a really positive message. It doesn't have to be a global ban on fishing, because that's not possible. These people are completely dependent on the ocean. Billions of people are dependent. So the important message is to keep everyone involved, and that small changes can make a big difference.
Absolutely, yeah, great message. Thank you, Celine. Russell, what was one of your favourite topics of conservation?
I guess one of the ones is about marine protected areas again, and I think, you know, the UK is very good at waving its flag and saying that 30% of the UK water is a designated marine protection area, but all the stuff around the British Isles, although it's a marine protected area, I mean, I'm sure you've seen, you know, they allow all of these super trawlers into them. So on paper, it's like, well, why have you designated a marine protected area if it's not protected? But then on the other side of the world, the territories that we've still managed to cling on to from the British Empire, places like South Georgia. And so the designated marine protection area around that has been really, really successful. And because it's properly kind of controlled and policed. And as a result, something, I believe it's like Southern Hemisphere humpbacks have seen like a 70% increase, which is phenomenal. I mean, you consider how like brutal whaling was at the height of, you know, in the 50s, and how that massive kind of keystone species has been able to rebound so successfully, even in the face of, you know, fishing, plastic pollution, ocean acidification, and all the rest of it. So I think for me, that's a really positive message, that if done properly, then, you know, we can strike this balance between successfully using our oceans and but without detrimentally harming them. So
definitely. And there was a lovely video going around on social media recently of South Orkney, which isn't just off the British Isles, it's South Orkney off Antarctica, and it showcases a wonderful video of the water just fizzing with whales. There are just blows from the whales all over, and I think it was a combination of humpbacks, blue whales, all sorts, you know. So yeah, it's great to see some of those positive stories. And in terms of writing the book again, so what were the kind of the key important elements for you in its development that you wanted to make sure were within the book? Russell, shall I?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, I really wanted it to be really current, and I guess what was really great is Celine went to Brighton Library and got out all these books that were really up to date and have obviously been peer reviewed and things. So we didn't fall into that like thing of like going onto Wikipedia and like using hearsay and things. And any fact that we put in it, we wanted to check that it was actually proper. But because, you know, we're both allied to academic institutions, it meant that we had access to all of these scientific journals and things. And so we could draw upon that. So I guess kind of keeping up to date was really important. And I guess, like I said, just making sure that like subtleties were in there, like the use of the singular ocean, and we explained why we did that, you know, at the beginning of the book and things. So those were the kind of important things for me to make sure that we included, and to make sure that it was like positive and empowering, not doom and gloom. So
and beautiful as well. There's lots of lovely images. Jack, I wonder if you can just share some of the photos. There's one here of a coral reef looking wonderfully diverse and rich. And there's another one on some, is that that would be the Arctic there with some polar bears on it. So what's your experiences, both of you, in terms of ocean exploration? Which areas, which biomes have you visited, and what's some of your sort of best stories of places you've visited? Celine, should we start with you?
Well, I've been lucky enough to move around quite a bit and travel a lot with my family, just up until this point in my life, at least. And where to start? Well, I grew up in Brighton. I mean, by the coast. I've nearly always lived by the coast, I've realised, but it wasn't until a bit later on that I realised how important the ocean really was. We spent a couple of months living in Australia when I was around 6 years old, and I was a bit scared because everyone portrays Australia as scary, both on land and in the water. So I was a bit apprehensive to get in the water. And then afterwards, on the way back, we spent a little while in Malaysia. And my parents finally convinced me to get into the water with a mask and snorkel on. And it was amazing. It was a whole different world. It was one of my first memories of looking underwater and seeing all these colorful, bright fish, and just thinking, wow, you know, that's completely different to what's up there. I think everyone should see this. And so that opened my eyes, and from there forward, I've, as I said, I've been lucky enough to move around to a few different places. But it's not only the tropical, beautiful coral reefs that really attract me. I love going out for a walk on like a windy British winter day and seeing the power of the ocean. That's something that really inspires me. Is that we live on an earth that's, you know, we've kind of completely colonized almost, and a lot of the land is built on or has been changed. And although we impact the ocean, it remains this open expanse of something that for me represents freedom and wilderness. And so for me, that's a real way of escaping reality and getting a bit invigorated and inspired by the outdoors.
Lovely, great, thank you. And over to you, Russell.
Again, I'm quite lucky. My parents decided that they were going to take me to Dubai to grow up, but this was when no one knew what Dubai was, and it was like 3 roads through a desert. So I was quite lucky to have a white sand beach on my doorstep for most of my childhood, and then moved back to England and was like, what is this? But no, I've been quite lucky also with my PhD. So I've been doing a lot of research in the Baltic, in Umeå, which is the northernmost city in Sweden. So yeah, going up there throughout the year. I think I've been 5 times, which is really cool. I was also able to blag my way onto a research cruise with the British Antarctic Survey. So came out of the southern tip of Chile in Punta Arenas. So went to the Falklands, went down to Bird Island that you were just talking about before, and we were surveying, taking water samples in deep ocean trenches, but then yeah, went up to South Georgia and things. So for me, that was really incredible, to these dots on the map and parts of the map you always looked at as a kid, and then you're like, oh my god, I'm there. That was quite cool. But I've got to say, I had probably one of my best ocean experiences ever in Suffolk last summer, where I used my plankton knowledge to decide that the conditions were good for a potential bioluminescence and went down there and was able to swim in a bioluminescent ocean, which is like top of my bucket list for ages. So I was really chuffed that I managed to do that last summer. So
yeah, and there is just so much variation, isn't there, between all of these countries, but UK coastal waters and the diversity we have from the southwest coast to the northeast is similarly incredible, isn't it? We have lots of lovely opportunities on our doorstep to experience our marine environment. So in terms of the book then, how do you feel we are progressing with our sort of modern media and different technologies? Obviously, young people today, my daughter included, they can sort of latch in onto a topic and find so much information online through videos, through Twitter, through different social media platforms. What do you think? Do you think that books will always have a place in our sort of repertoire of opportunities for learning? And how do you think books benefit other forms of modern media?
Do you want to go, Russell, or else I can?
I was like, that's a good question. I was like, I'll let you go first, Celine.
Okay, you know, I can go. Well, I love books. A bit old-fashioned, but I hope they stay part of our way of learning. And the reason for that is, like you say, we're so overloaded online with the information that's available. And firstly, it's not all fact checked. That you can find any result you want, because there's even peer-reviewed articles that will say exactly the opposite of a different article, which is a bit worrying, but that's beside the point. It's just there's so much information out there, and when you scroll through social media, there's lots of things, but you're not 100% focused on one thing. You're kind of scrolling, and I'm guilty of this myself. You start reading something, but then you're like, oh, okay, and you scroll to the next thing, and there's not 100% focus. Whereas for me, when I pick up a book, I get sucked in, at least when it's a well-written book like this one, hopefully. You sit down with it, you have something in your hands, it smells good. I like how books smell. And you have 100% of your attention on the thing in front of you. There's not loads of images and things moving around. It's just there. And whether it's just written text and then you can imagine the pictures, or whether there are images to go with it, I think it's a much more wholesome and engaging experience than what we receive on social media. But obviously, it's restricted in the sense that they can't be updated as quickly, so there is a bit of a lag. So I think the two types of information complement each other, but I really hope that books remain.
Me too. And I also love the smell of books, especially the really old ones.
Yes.
That kind of slightly musty smell. And we have actually, I should just plug while we are at the Marine Biological Association, that we've got the National Marine Biological Library here, which is one of the biggest collections of marine journals and books in the globe. So we've got a huge collection here. So I unfortunately don't quite have enough time to be able to steal away in there and pore over all of the lovely old illustrations. And there's something quite romantic, I think, about a book and being able to just really, as you say, just focus in on them. Russell, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think there's a place for both. And I mean, we were lucky that we had both books and the internet to be able to draw upon. I mean, I'm just thinking back about how much easier it is to get information now. Like, PhD students today don't know they have it born. I mean, I remember having to go to this one computer in the National Oceanography Centre and you'd have to type in keywords and then write down all of the things and then go to these big shelves with these big windy handles and then get all the journals out. Then you'd have to photocopy them and try and fit as many pages on so it was cheap. And then you had to go put all the journals back. And so you could spend an entire day. Now you just keyword search, go, and you've got all the journals. And it's just it's unbelievable that having the internet and that power at your fingertips, I think there's a lot to say about social media as well. And I mean, a big component of my research was someone from the MBA was posting about this piece of equipment that they were doing a demonstration of it. And I was like, whoa, that's amazing. I didn't even know that existed. And then they were like, yeah, come down, check it out. And it became probably 3-4 chapters of my PhD were written based on a piece of equipment which I saw on Twitter that I previously didn't know existed. So yeah, I think it's really powerful and a great way to connect people, you know.
So underground posters, and then also Twitter has been the source of your inspiration. That's brilliant. And what was the unit? Was it the continuous plankton recorder that you ended up?
No, it was a Flowcam.
Ah, yeah, the Flowcam. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? Because it's a great bit of kit. I get very excited about it.
I just, honestly, it's like living in the future. So I'm not a biologist, but I'm studying plankton. So you can imagine how terrified I was having to do phytoplankton ID. And you get the traditional ways. You got this little square slide that was divided up into like 500 boxes, and then you put like 5 milliliters on it. There's a picture of it, right? So, and then you'd have to stay there underneath a microscope, and you'd have to just like know what you were looking at, and then have like a tally chart next to it. So you could probably log about 300 cells in an hour and a half, and they're complete. It's completely like down to how good you are as an individual doing your taxonomic identification. The Flowcam, what you do is you pour your sample in the top of it, and it just takes photos of all the plankton as it goes through this little cell. And so it can tell, I think I photographed like 6,000 cells in 10 minutes, like compared. So, and it photographed and kept a digital image of each of them, which I could then sort, and I could come back and refer to. And so if everyone was like, I think you did that wrong, I could be like, well, you have a look at all my images then. So honestly, it was like living in the future. I couldn't believe how good it was. So I went down, and so the one at the MBA set up for zooplankton. So I went over to Plymouth Marine Lab and used theirs, which was set up for phytoplankton. And yeah, I spent, I think like 12 hours a day for a week, just pouring my samples in the top of a Flowcam.
Great stuff. And as with the books, Jack's actually sharing some of those images from the Flowcam. Jack, that's amazing you're able to bring them up so quickly. So thank you for your behind the scenes support there.
Yeah, I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
But even with this, you know, in the same way that we have old books and we have modern media, the Flowcam can take all these images, but actually we need the human eye to be able to decipher what can often be, you know, squashed or squished in some of our silk samples. So all of this sort of years of experience and knowledge of identifying species will never beat yet the Flowcam. So it's great that we have these two options. Brilliant. So nice to be able to touch on plankton there as well. So I guess the final thing before we take some questions from people, so just to remind people, if you'd like to ask any questions, feel free to do that at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A function there, so you can ask some questions of Celine and Russell. So last question for you is, what's next? What's your next pathway in your career? So Celine, you've just moved to France. Do you want to tell us a bit about your upcoming work there?
Yes, so I've just started a 2-year master's degree. Well, I'm halfway through the first year already. It goes very quick. A new experience to study in another language. That's an extra challenge. But I'm really enjoying it. And as part of this degree, we do 2 long internships where we work with different organizations or research centers. And I'm quite excited because in 5 weeks time, I'm going to be near Vancouver Island for 2 months, where I'm going to be working on extracting scarring data from pictures of orca. And then I'm going to create a model to see if there's a relationship between different ages or sexes or the sociability of individuals, and if they're scarring each other more, if they're more aggressive. So we're using scars as a proxy. So that's going to be what I'm going to be doing for the next few months. So that's my near future plan, at least.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, beautiful place to be heading to. And Russell, what about you? What's next for you?
So it's kind of Incredible Oceans, just trying to, now things are kind of easing up. We're getting a lot of interest in attending various festivals and events. So we've got one lined up. We're doing the Maidenhead Big Read, where we're trying to promote, trying to use the ocean to get reluctant readers into reading and show them the importance of that. So we're doing all that. On top of that, we're ramping up our training that we do with academics. So a lot of science communication training for academics mainly focuses on make eye contact, don't use big words. And so we recognize that a lot of environmental scientists, so people who, you know, climate change, marine scientists, ecologists, quite often their agenda to communicate their science is to change the behavior of the audience that they're talking to. So we we draw upon cultural dynamics and values and things like that within our training to show how the same message can be given across different audiences to make it more likely that they'll change their behavior on the information they've been given. So that's another big thing. And I've also started working with the Sainsbury laboratory at Cambridge University within it's a plant science lab. So using my phytoplankton background, I am going to be trying to get 16 to 25-year-olds all excited about plant science. So, including the marine plant, seagrass. Exactly.
Shoehorn that one in there.
Definitely getting that in there. So.
Brilliant, great. Well, you talk about behavioural change, and I'm sure once people have read Ocean Endangered, it really will sort of inspire them and connect them to the ocean even more. So it's been great talking to you about your book and your careers. So we're just going to go over to any questions that MB might have now. Has anyone got anything they'd like to ask? We do have a raise hand function as well. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask and would rather have your microphone switched on, we can do that if you click raise hand.
I'd also like to say, even if it's a stupid question, feel free to answer it. There's no such thing as a stupid question, so don't feel embarrassed. Just go for it. Just go for it.
So we've got a hands up here from Michael. So Michael, I'm just going to enable you to switch your microphone on now. So Jack, can you switch Michael's microphone on? Hello, Michael.
Yeah, hi there. I was just actually typing out a question, right? Then I thought it's a lot easier to talk, actually, strangely enough. Yeah, thanks, guys, for that interesting and fascinating discussion. I just want to come back on something that Celine was saying earlier about fishing, and you can't really ban fishing. I'm just wondering what your view is on Sylvia Earle's recent comments at COP26 that we have to ban industrial fishing on the high seas to preserve basically the ocean, and the kind of carbon cycle and the health of the ocean. Because at the moment, I mean, we are just extracting. And I'm extremely pessimistic, I must admit, at the moment, and concerned that humans are extracting more and more of the oceans. I mean, for instance, we are now, there's a 24-hour, 365-day-a-year industry in industrial fishing in the southern oceans for krill. But there are no plans to look at actually extracting phytoplankton as well for health pills. And I just, we've now lost most of the big fish in the ocean over the last 50 years. And Russell mentioned earlier about super trawlers. It seems to be happening at an unprecedented rate. I mean, I was tracking 2 super trawlers last week working off the Cornish coast. And when you consider these boats actually are towing a pelagic net about a mile long and about 200 meters wide, you just think at some point, as Sylvia Earle is pointing out, that we are going to get to the point where we basically, the whole marine ecosystems of the ocean will come to a tipping point, I think. And it may just collapse. I mean, I genuinely do believe that now. I wish I didn't have to think that way, but I do think it could be in a much shorter period than we previously believed. So I'm just wondering what your view is about somehow stopping industrial fishing on the high seas. Sorry, a bit of a long spiel there, but
no, it's a very pertinent question. I probably didn't specify enough, but when I talked about the fact that we couldn't ban fishing I was talking about small scale fisheries,
Yeah.
and talking about people whose primary source of protein and primary source of even food is marine based. And that, I believe, we can never completely ban, as in force people to eat nothing and extract nothing, because that's not sustainable. But at the same time, what you're talking about, these large scale super trawlers that are fishing in international waters where there is little legislation against it, and where there is legislation, it's a bit like what Russell was talking about earlier. It's on paper. There's no one enforcing it. So that definitely has to change, but I'm not really sure how, because unfortunately, at risk of sounding a bit pessimistic there, international law does not seem to be being very effective on this. Although there is a part in our book where we talk about there are new discussions in place on UNICLOS. That's, I believe, the newest international treaties on the sea. And at the time of writing, these discussions were put on pause because of COVID. So hoping that there are things moving forward and that there will be more concrete legislation put in place. But in general, we need to shift away from extracting so much. We're very consumerist in a lot of ways, including in our ocean. And just because we can't see what we're extracting and what's being lost, we keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and taking things out. And the quotas of how much fish can be fished is based on science, but often we don't actually know the size of the populations of different species. So how can we say how much we can take out? And we don't take into account all the other threats that these species are under. So definitely need to work on extracting less, and in general, this is personal point of view, shifting more towards plant-based diets, not completely, but in general, because the meat and dairy industry have a strong impact on the climate, but also directly on the ocean, because agricultural runoff and all kinds of eutrophication are really caused by that. So I would say, and I saw an interesting post, interestingly, on Instagram, I think I saw it pass, they created a vegetarian, plant-based salmon substitute. It was a picture. It looked exactly like salmon, but completely plant-based with some algae in it, I think, for the kind of protein side. And they were saying, oh, we think this might start challenging the fishing industry. So that was just an interesting input from social media.
I have actually tasted that, and it's not too bad. It's pretty good. There's a link that's just been shared on the chat. Thank you, really, for sharing that initially. That's on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. So if you wanted to have a click on that, it's Wikipedia, but I'm sure there's lots of factual information there as well. Russell, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I think what is really important is so much of the rhetoric around Brexit was reclaiming our oceans, yet, British fish for British people and all of that. But then, and so I feel like it's the audacity for whoever it was to allow these, super trawlers into these things. On the face of it, we're supposed to be supporting our local fishermen, etc., etc. But this is clearly going very much against that. So I think we need to. It comes down to kind of education and contacting our MPs and things like that. I think voting as a consumer is really important, and it's a thing. I love eating seafood, but I'll be honest, I found it really difficult to go into places, especially with this moustache, and say like, excuse me, do you know where your fish is from and how it's been caught? And I'm always just met with complete like, it's from the freezer, So in the end, I've decided that it's actually really difficult to have those conversations with people, and I'd rather kind of give my money to organisations that deserve it. I think it's also really important. So I've been having. I went and visited the Carrymore seaweed farm down in Pembrokeshire, and it's amazing, and this big community project where they're looking to not only provide jobs for the area, but growing the seaweed in conjunction with shellfish is providing like a habitat for fish, while also removing excess nutrients from eutrophication. But their biggest barrier has been that it's taken them years and years and years to get the license from the Crown in order to get the seaweed farm put in place. And so on the face of it, it's a brilliant idea. But, you know, as an island nation, Celine was talking about before, you know, with the 9th largest island, we really need to be ahead of the curve when it comes to using our marine sources sustainably. And I think like supporting seaweed farms and making that easier is an important part of that. So yeah, I'll try and share the link to check them out. But they've got a seaweed, they've got a shop online where you can buy seaweed with various recipes and things. I bought some dulse, which I've used. You use as your bacon replacement, which is quite good fun. So let me send this to everyone. But yeah, go and check out Carry More. Amazing organisation. So there we go.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your question, Michael, and great answers. Willie, you've got your hand up. So Willie is our director of the MBA. Just like to have your microphone switched on, Jack, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, great. It's great. I might have missed this with my internet connection was going on and off there. So I'm sure you're well aware that we're within the UN Decade of the Ocean. We're a year into that. And they talk about some of the grand challenges. I mean, what would you like to see as one of the grand challenges of where you'd like to be by 2030?
Ooh, good question, Willie. I'm going to throw Russell into the deep end on this one.
Okay, well, I think having this focus and having the UN make resources available to scientists, I'm really hoping that a chunk of that goes into making scientists more effective communicators. And I think this really came, I don't know if people have seen on Netflix, the Don't Look Up. And for me, that film was all about highlighting the importance of effective science communication, where Leonardo DiCaprio's character goes in and is trying to explain to the president what's going on, and he completely turns into a scientist and does a really bad job of getting that across. And I think that this is so much of the problem, is that we need to get scientists better and more savvy at communicating their science to policymakers and the people that matter, so then they can put the things in place. So I'm hoping that at the end of this decade, we will have an entire, all of the marine scientists in the world will be the best communicators ever. And all the policymakers will be like, whoa, now I understand what you're saying. Now I'm going to listen to what you've got to say, and I'm going to implement this new thing. That's my rose-tinted spectacle version of the UN Decade of the Ocean.
Well, it's called grand challenges, not impossible challenges, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point, and yeah, I saw that film, and it was an excellent parody of the reality, unfortunately. But I mean, there's a good opportunity for the global community to get together and talk with a common voice to actually do something that's worthwhile. You know, I think part of the problem we have is that there's so many of the different countries that are working in silos trying to solve the problem. And I think I think you get some way towards, you know, the problem there in terms of working together to try and solve many of the grand challenges that are out there, and that does include not only speaking to scientists, but speaking to everybody, and the you know, from policymakers to the ocean managers to, you know, the fishing communities, to try and you know, the other part of the UN Decade is for a long-term sustainable ocean. As far as, you know, it's the Sustainable Development Goals. So it is important. But yeah, I mean, your book goes a long way towards addressing many of the challenges. I commend you in that.
Yeah, I think the final chapter in the book talks about that State of the Ocean paper that came out in 2020, I think, from Carlos Duarte, and, you know, it says that we currently have the technology the funding and the resources to send our ocean back to a pre-industrial state in a single generation. So I feel like we'd be missing a trick if we didn't try and do that. But I mean, I know that's massively easier said than done. And yeah, I mean, like you say, this idea of people coming together is really important. And you just have to look at the state of like marine conservation, just in the UK alone. The fact that, I don't know, I think there's like 100 different whale and dolphin charities in the UK. I mean, so it's like, and each one is vying for their own little pot of money. And it's like, well, I do whales and dolphins, you can't, kind of thing. So I do think there needs to be a collective voice and people coming together and putting their egos aside. I think that's a really important part of this. So.
And I think that's what the MBA, our vision is, to be the voice of marine biology, and hopefully we're working towards that goal. And one thing following on from that, Russell, from what you're saying about scientists being able to be really passionate and accessible science communicators, I think that's really happening. From my experience here at the MBA, we've got so many incredible scientists that are very good communicators, and particularly I should say that some of the younger generation who are coming through, who've got that social media understanding, because it's just part of their just generational experience, so I think we're heading in the right direction, to add a nice positive angle. We've just got we've got time for one more question, I think. So we've got an anonymous attendee who's just asking about ocean literacy. So you've mentioned this a few times now. Can you just explain a little bit more about what ocean literacy is? Cool. Maybe some of the 7 key principles, even if you can remember them off the top of your head.
Well, I was just going to say it in one sentence. What it is. Ocean literacy is having an awareness of how the ocean affects our everyday life and how you also affect the ocean.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you, Celine. Have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that was a very good definition, and I think that's a very nice way to sum it up. In response to previous questions as well, it's just education, because like we said, we have the science is there, we know how to make the changes, it's just the knowledge isn't shared, and it's a question of people not being able to communicate, and a question of also barriers like social barriers, language barriers, economic barriers with access to literature, scientific journals not being free. One of my biggest pet peeves, and yeah, that's why I just think that we should share what we learn, because we know very little, but we also know a lot, if that makes any sense. There's a lot more to explore, but we have a lot of knowledge collectively, and if we were to share it, we could do some great things.
We certainly can, and thank you for sharing what you've learned through the Ocean Endangered book. Congratulations on that. It's a great read. Do go and look it up on the various different publishing houses on the websites, and thank you for joining us, Russell and Celine. It's been a great opportunity to talk to you a little bit more and hear more from you. Wish you all the best with your future plans, with that be AUKUS or education on plant science, and hope we might be able to see you again very soon. So thank you for joining us, and that just leaves me to say thank you. And that just leaves me to say thank you to everybody that's attended today. We will have other opportunities to bring along other speakers to our Marine Biology Live sessions. So do keep an eye out on our website and our social media channels. That's at the MBA UK on Twitter, Facebook, even Instagram and TikTok. My powers of communication now failing, so it's obviously that time of day. So just to wish you well, have a lovely evening, and hope to see you all soon. Thanks very much.